Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 4 of season 2 of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole M. Young Martin, and I serve as a producer and host for this series. And I'm coming to you from my home office in Northern Connecticut. Before we get started, for those who have been watching before, know that we are still existing in the moment of COVID, so you may hear my dogs or my family in the background during the next hour. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind-the-scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted over 30 authors representing various genres, including children's books, young adult fiction, poetry, urban creative nonfiction, memoir, history, essays, food, and culture from around the globe. Today, we welcome horror writer Tracy Cross. Tracy's forthcoming debut novel, Rootwork, will be published later this year. Based in Washington, D.C., she writes horror fiction. A widely published author, her works have appeared in Don't Break the Oath by Khadijah Press, 99 Tiny Terrors, and anthologies and magazines including Big Book of Bootleg Horror, Things That Go Bump, The Evolution Z Horror Magazine, Tales of the Lost Volume 2, and websites Midnight and Indigo and New American Legends. In 2016, Tracy was awarded the Boston Accent Literary Journal Prize. You can find out more about her at tracycrossonline.com or on Instagram at Tracy Cross Writes. Today's episode is being presented in collaboration with Levee Break Lit. Thank you so very much to Lisa Pegram and her company for introducing us to Tracy Cross. For those who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format of our show. First, Tracy will share an excerpt of her work. Afterwards, we'll engage in a conversation. Then we'll open it up to Q&A to all of our viewers. We have viewers joining us from both Facebook and YouTube today. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comment section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will compile the questions and pose them to Tracy following our conversation. Now, I'd like to bring Tracy Cross onto the virtual stage. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. It's a little cold here in DC, but I'm okay. I'm inside.
Oh, good. It's a little cold here in Connecticut. I was hoping one of us would have like some sunshine to pass to the other.
Well, we just got lovely filtered sunlight coming in, so hopefully that evens out all of my complexion.
But the sunlight is making you look amazing. Your skin is glowing. I was like, hey, melanin.
Thank you, girl. Thank you.
Yes.
You look good too.
Thank you.
Shoulder down. Okay, girl.
Yes. I was like, I gotta show some skin when I'm on camera.
Hey, we do what we must.
Yes. So I'd like to turn it over to you. So have fun.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to be reading a little bit from my book, Rootwork, which will be published this year. And it's the story of 3 sisters that are trying to basically figure out their stance in life, where they're supposed to be. So this part that I'm going to be reading is going to be an integral part because they're walking through the forest and they're going to meet up with their aunt, who they're going to spend a memorable summer with. Okay. The girls walked in silence while the wind rustled through the leaves. The air smelled like wet grass and wood rot. Pee-wee paused to look up at the huge trees touching the sky. She walked over and put her hand on a tree trunk and pretended to listen. Watch out for the moss around the roots, Betty warned. That's where monsters live that take you to hell. Pee-wee laughed it off, but took her hand off the tree. Anne, walking in between Pee-wee and Betty, jumped and screamed when the snake fell in her path. The further they walked into the forest, the more it smelled like wildflowers. It smells so good, Pee-wee said. You think there's a field close by so I can pick some flowers? Probably not, Betty explained. That smell carries on the wind like a skunk. Anne deadpan. Well, the flowers smell pretty, and I imagine they is pretty. A branch cracked and fell next to the path. All the girls jumped and laughed. I imagine trees groan when they try to reach the sky, Pee-wee said. Anne and Betty let her comments pass. There wasn't much around them, just a few woodpeckers, maybe a small flock of ducks trying to find the water. When the ducks crossed in front of them, the girls stopped. Pee-wee squatted down and oohed and eyed at how tiny the smaller ducks were. Careful, don't want a gator to come up and bite you. Betty pushed Pee-wee a bit. You best watch it, Pee-wee said. Betty looked down, led them down the path. She stopped abruptly and looked like she was dancing. Anne and Pee-wee looked at each other and shrugged. I done walked into a spider's web, damn it. Anne, this is all your fault. Betty pulled at the invisible webbing on her body and swatted at her face. Pee-wee, is there anything on my back or on my face? I kind of don't like spiders, so I'm going to say no. Really? Anne, can you check? I don't like spiders much either. Betty trotted in front of Anne. Stay still. I can't see much with you moving, and there's not enough light over here. We're going to have to go off the path and into the field or something. Anne tried to inspect Betty's shirt before she looked up into the leaves that blocked the large amount of light. There's some sun over there, Pee-wee pointed. To their left was a thick patch of grass. Dragonflies drifted lazily above it, while frogs croaked on some nearby logs. To their right, they heard something splash into the water. Probably ducks, Anne said. Well, let's go over there and see. Betty marched off the path towards the grass. Anne followed her. I don't think this is a good idea. My foot is stuck in something. Oh, no, gators, Pee-wee whispered. Please, ain't no gators down here. Oh! Betty tripped mid-sentence. She jumped and ran back over to the path. Come on! The girls ran behind her, Anne trying to get the muck off her shoe. Once they ran a bit, they leaned over, breathing heavy. Oh, God, what was it? Pee-wee asked. I want to say a gator, but it could have been a log. Betty laughed. I feel real stupid now. Anne whacked her shoe against the tree and had us running like fools. They all laughed before they started walking again. You know, when Pa is home, sometimes Ma's real happy. But when he ain't there, she's floating around the place. What's going on? Y'all know? Betty asked. Well, she say he come home rich and go out. Then he come back from the races broke or something. Anne responded. Y'all think he got another family somewheres? Pee-wee perked up and asked. Dunno, but Pa ain't the smartest, Betty said. Well, it's just that when I can't sleep, I think stuff like that. Pee-wee said. It'd be sad, though. I'd be real sad, Anne interjected. I know, man. I loves my Pa. Pee-wee swatted lower at the shrubs. Nothing we need to worry about now. He home with us now, Betty faced him. We smart like Ma and her can. They always put a little aside, and they call it just in case money. Anne stared at Betty and put her index finger and thumb under her chin while she looked up at the sky. You know, we always got stuff and never do without. I'm not going to worry about it. Let's get to getting. Looks like the clouds is rolling in, but I can't be sure. Betty led them again. Anne, is your shoe okay? Pee-wee watched Anne half jump down the path trying to put her shoe on again. Good as it get. Hey, y'all. Seriously, what if Pa running numbers again? Pee-wee snapped the twig off a bush. I heard Pa's Pa was killed gambling. Betty waved them forward, ignoring Pee-wee. We should almost be there. For real? Anne asked. Yup. And how Ma, she only wanted girls because she ain't want to have to send her sons to follow the railroad. Y'all know, looking for work like Pa, she say 'tain't safe. Well, we ain't no safer. Y'all know Deborah in my class last year. I heard she done got married and everything. Her mom let her live with some rich white man to take her to the city, and now she lives in some big old house on Bourbon Street. How is that not safe? Anne asked. I said he was a white man. And besides, no one heard from her since. Pee-wee joked. Maybe she got a new face or something. Maybe she's just in Europe somewhere. Anne hollowly responded. Shh, I hear something. Betty squatted and the girls pulled in close to her, none of them daring to breathe. The leaves shuffled. Someone was singing a melody and sounded like they were talking to themselves. I can hear y'all a mile away. Y'all louder than a rooster in an empty hen house. A very tall, dark-skinned woman stood in front of them. She looked down at them and smiled before extending a hand. I only heard of you before, Pee-wee. Betty, Ann, nice to see you again. Aunt Teddy! Betty stepped forward and hugged her. You was real little when she come round. How little? Ann asked. Like a baby little. Teddy stretched out her arms. Ann ran over and hugged her. You got to smell like something familiar. I remember this smell. And I heard so much about you. I mean, besides from Ma calling you a swamp rat. But Skeet said good stuff, though. Teddy hugged her and kissed her on the forehead. Some things don't change. You look like my pa, but you is a lady, Pee-wee whispered. He is my brother. He's my little brother and all I got in the world. Now come and give your auntie a hug. Pee-wee ran and jumped into her arms. That's a girl. Oh, you do smell good. Pee-wee exhaled into her neck. A lady has to be unforgettable. Remember that. Teddy smiled and placed Pee-wee on the ground. Now I got 3 beautiful nieces, so I guess I's happier now. She turned and picked up a burlap sack and started walking. Y'all coming? I'm guessing my brother put up a good enough argument seeing that your mom still called me a swamp rat. What else you know? Ann teased. I know y'all supposed to stay with me a few days. The girls looked at each other in amazement. She magic, Pee-wee whispered. So what you do? Ann pushed her way to the front of the line and walked behind Teddy. Today, I'm out gathering stuff. I got some work to do for some town folk. Aunt Teddy stopped and picked up something. See, this here onion is for fever. If you got one, you bind it to yourself or somebody and it'll break it right up. They watched her shove a few onions into her bag. She took a few steps forward and grabbed a bunch more from the ground. She dusted dirt off the roots and dropped them in the sack. What else you got in that bag? Ann asked. A lot of this and that. Teddy heaved and set the burlap bag on the ground. She started to pull things out. I always have my Bible. That's important. But you's a conjure woman. Why you got that Bible? Ann furrowed her eyebrows. I can believe in Jesus and God. This ain't voodoo. This here is hoodoo that I do. What's the difference? Pee-wee pushed forward and asked. Hoodoo got one God. Voodoo don't. Teddy rooted around in the bag. She grabbed some things and put them on the ground. These are snakes and some dead and dried scorpions. I got some brown beer bottles to catch some spirits. And what's the snakes for? Ann squatted, examining the dead animals. Well, I can use it to make gopher dust. I got some sacks of spices in these little bags. Here's some devil's grass for blinding someone. Teddy held up a cloth filled with something that looked like sand. Oh, this is dirt from an anthill. I hear if you sprinkle it on food, it make a person crazy. Ooh, I wish I had that in school, Pee-wee said under her breath. No, you don't. You're too young to cast spells and such, Teddy laughed. But I'll show you how to gather some stuff for me. Is that all we gonna be doing? Betty put her hand on her hip. If that's all you want to do. If not, don't worry about it. Teddy finished putting the things in the burlap sack. I got a feeling that you don't want to be here. Oh, what gave it away? Betty dryly asked. I'm sorry for my sister. She just had other stuff to do. Ann stood, wiping the dirt from her knees. Teddy smiled. It's okay. I got something for all of you to do. She grunted and lifted the burlap sack onto her back. Pee-wee, can you grab those bottles on the ground? I got to pick up a little bit more stuff before we head back. Pee-wee grabbed 2 brown beer bottles. Ann grabbed 2 more. Betty tried to step over the bottles before Ann pressed the bottles into her hands. Please? Betty snatched the bottles and turned up her nose. She sighed and stepped around them to follow Teddy. Try and keep up, y'all. Teddy led them. We got lots of work to do, so let's get moving. I got us a chicken and some fresh berries for lunch. Unless y'all ain't ate them hoe cakes yet, then you can have that. Pee-wee stared at her. She is amazing. Aunt Teddy laughed. Let's get going, little one. There's a lot involved in learning root work. It's not just a one-day kind of thing. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Can I say that your dialogue speaks very much like Zero Nara Hurston, where it's like, it's a very tight, concise look at a community. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, I absolutely love. There's so many lines that I love in your work.
Thank you so much. I did so much research for this because I had to get it right. You know, it's not about making it okay. It's about getting it right. And you know, when you want to like look for something and that's a specific time period where you want to write about it, you want it to be correct and you want kind of the reader to feel immersed in the dialogue and in the story, as opposed to like, oh well, it says it takes place then, but I don't know, what she's really talking about.
So that's a great way to segue into our conversation. So the title Root Work is very thought provoking. Can you tell us about the title, how it was chosen, and what window does it open for the reader to its story?
Well, so as we know, as Black people, our ancestors came over from Africa and they brought some of the traditions that they practiced over there with them to America. So, root work is like a type of practice. It's like earth magic. So, it's not voodoo, but it's hoodoo. So, it is like magic and healing practiced together. Like I like to say, it's earth magic. And I chose the title because I just liked the way that it sounded. It played well, and it just kind of describes the overall everything that's happening in the book. The windows that it opens up for the readers is it opens up a window for all of us to reach back into the past and learn more things about ourselves. Because I think that we only go back so far. We don't go back far enough to really learn about who our people are and who we come from. And when I went and did my research, I learned that aside from, like the weird things that my grandmother, my mother, and my, they did, that they all practiced root work in one way or another. And I needed to find some context for this. So that's why I chose that.
Nice. Root Work is situated in the South post Civil War. Why this particular time period and why this particular location in the country?
The funny thing is, okay, well, it's not funny, but my grandmother died recently and she was blind, but she grew up in the South. They've had a pretty fun kind of life. They lived here, they lived there, they lived there. And the reasons for them moving are very interesting and stories in and of themselves. But we were sitting at my mother's house, and my grandmother, I had written another story about a brother of hers that had died. And she decided to tell me this story about her grandfather. And that's what the basis of root work is. And she told me, she said we were living down in the parish in Louisiana. And I'm like, oh, like let me start, I had to pull out my iPhone and I started recording it really covertly because she's blind. And I was just like, I don't want to screw this up at all. So when she was telling me the story and she was telling me all the elements of it, when I came home and listened to it, I said, I gotta use this. And I had to research and figure out what year would she have been living and when would this have taken place so that I could best try to reflect that history in the story.
Nice. So this leads into the next question. How Southern is the text? I can tell a lot from the dialogue. Then how African American is the text? And then, given where it's situated, how Louisiana is the text?
Well, I can say that the original draft, the text was more, for lack of a better word, severe. It was because when I did the research, you have to understand in this time period, Black spoke differently. Like we don't speak like we do now, but we spoke in a different kind of cadence and tone, and it was all based on where you were from, and like I'm from the North, so I say things this way. He's from the South, he says things that way. So when I did the research, I decided to try and represent that as best as I could in the writing. Now, my editor, he was like, you want people to read this, like you got to kind of tone this down a little bit. And we went back and forth and I toned it down. But the one thing that I didn't do was that I didn't bring it into the now. So there's not a whole lot of text that reflects on how we speak now to each other, because that wouldn't be good for a book that takes place in like the late 1880s or 1889 in Louisiana. Now, how Louisiana is the text, I could only go by what my grandma told me, and I can only go by what I have heard my family members speak and the research that I've done. And when I did the research, I read a lot of Zora Neale Hurston, and I listened to like a lot of there was some stuff from Indiana University that I got to listen to, and it all kind of had that same kind of bump and cadence. So when it was when I was doing the research and reading it, the text from the people that spoke in Louisiana read just like the text that the Southerners spoke in Alabama, just like in North Carolina. It just all read the same on the page to me. So that's, and I didn't know, like Louisiana slang back then. So I just kind of did what I could. I did the best that I could, I do believe.
Yes. And thank you for citing Hurston. Like, I think you and her have very similar qualities when it comes to the ways in which you represent and showcase a particular culture. Your
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I love Zora Neale Hurston. I'm actually teaching her right now in my class. Your protagonists are young Black girls growing up at a turning point for the Black experience in the United States and in the South. Who are your protagonists, and what do you owe them and your reader by situating them specifically in the horror genre?
So the protagonist in my book, I had to think about this a lot because my grandma's had a lot of brothers and sisters. She's got like, I always get it wrong, and I need my sister Terry to be here with me. I want to say it's less than 17, but more than 10. But this was commonplace back then. It's like
Mhm.
when you meet someone and you go to date now, I'm just like, can you please give me all of your ancestors' last names so that we're not cousins and if something happens. So what I did was for the protagonist, I have a great aunt, her name is Betty. My mom's sister, her name is Patricia Ann. And Pee Wee was just a name that I just really loved. I'd heard it tossed around a lot. Sadly, it was my grandma's dog's name, but I loved the name. The girl's name is actually Hattie Ann. So I've taken elements of my great aunts, all of them that I grew up with, and I put them in each of the sisters. So when I'm speaking to my mother about it, she's like, well, that sounds like your Aunt Betty. That sounds like so and so. That sounds, I know I grew up with like my Aunt Patricia Ann, and she was very dry, just very, very dry. I miss her so much, but she was just a very
Nice.
dry person. Like she was like me. She had like a quick wit, and I just loved her so much. But she's incorporated throughout that. Why I situated this, because the protagonists are three sisters, so they can be three sisters from any time or any place, and put into the horror genre because it'll work. It works for me because I have two sisters. There's three of us. Three is always a magic number, but I wanted to put them in here because there are other things about the sisters. There's a bond between sisters that is just an unspeakable bond. You can't break the bond no matter what. And I love my sisters dearly, just like I know that my grandma loved her sisters, that, they were the older ones. So they all grew up together and they loved each other so much, even when they were fighting, you could tell. And I mean, they were fun, but I just wanted to put a little piece of me and my family into this by putting the three sisters in and kind of combining the characters of my great aunts and my aunt into this text.
Nice. And I love the maternal connections to the work. And speaking of that, you use a third person narrator for this book. Why that particular choice?
Well, so with the book, there are several different point of view perspectives. You get the story from Pee Wee's point of view, you get the story from Betty's point of view, you get the story from Anne's point of view. You have like interspersed between the chapters, there are individual chapters of them. So you can see the world through their eyes, which is what I wanted the reader to see. I wanted them to see why Anne wanted to go and study this, why, how Pee Wee felt after this tragic event happens in the story, why Betty makes the decisions that she does. And then with the third person omniscient, I wanted to have so you have a well-rounded view of everything that is happening, but you get a little bit more with the one-on-one characters, which is why I chose to do it that way.
Nice. How has your voice, style, technique evolved over time? When writing horror fiction, what elements of storytelling are most important to you? Is it the character, the dialogue, plot, narrator, point of view, or conflict?
Well, I have to say that I'm still evolving as a writer. You never stop growing,
Hmm.
right? You never stop learning.
Yeah.
So I am still evolving. I am still, people read my work and they're like, "Oh, Tracy, this is how, you always have this twist at the end." And I always look for the little twist. And I'm like, "Yeah, but I want to try and do that." My biggest thing is when I'm writing, the elements of storytelling that are most important to me nowadays that I focus on are sensory details. Because when you
Mhm.
read a book, you want to smell things, you want to taste, you want to touch, you want to, the more immersed you feel in that book, the better you'll like it. If I'm reading about a haunted house, I want to feel like I'm in the house. I want to smell the smells of the haunted house, which is why I put an emphasis on the things that they smelled when they were walking through the woods, the things that they saw, how her foot hit this log, and all of these other things. So I think, but when it comes to story, I think all things are important, like the conflict, the dialogue, the plot, the narrator. You have to be able to do it in such a way that people can relate. So you don't want to write over people's heads, but you
Mhm.
also don't want to dumb it down too stupid for them either. And they'll just be like, "Oh, well, it's like Dick saw Jane and Dick jumped over Jane." You just don't want to do that. So I try to write it in a manner that it's almost conversational, like it's like my sisters and I having a conversation, or I'm talking to my parents or something like that. And like you as a reader can feel like you can come in and sit down and join us in the conversation.
Oh, I love that. I so love that. And for me, given that I love reading, I want to be able to take the journey with the characters as well. So when you mentioned the haunted house, I'm like, I want somebody to just jump out at me and go boo from the book. My family is going to be like, this she needs to go somewhere. But me, I'm like,
No,
I
no,
need
no. That's what's the good part of it is the more immersed you are in the book, the bet. Like I read the Incredible World of or the Incredible Life of Oscar Wilde by Juno Diaz,
Mm,
and I was so into that book that it felt like I was there. So when
yeah.
the bad things happened, I'm sitting on the couch reading the book. I'm crying the ugly cry, like, "Aah," because the bad things always happened. And when a writer is that good that you are crying with them in the book because something bad happened to the character, that's what matters the most to me. That's what I try to portray. That's what I tried really hard to do in this book. I wanted you to come in, meet the girls, get to know the girls, get to know their family, get to know where they are, get to know their little friend. Everybody's got a friend that's got a
Yeah.
name like Bump or something, and then everybody's got somebody like Skeet, that's over here. So just, I wanted it to feel like home for a lot of people. Just, I wanted it to feel like home.
And so relatable too. Like I've had so many books where I cried at the end when it was over because it was like, where am I to go? Like, what am I gonna do now? I don't know where to do it. Like I've
You
had
got
so
that
many books like that.
withdrawal, and you're just like, so what else you got, Juno Diaz? What else you
Yay!
got for me? And then it's like, I have another book coming out in 5 years. Like, that is not sufficient.
That is not
You need to give
sufficient.
me something now.
You need to be writing more now. And speaking of writing and like particular genres, so what does it mean to write horror at this time? Because I know you've written in some other styles. And then what are the possibilities and limitations of writing for this particular genre?
So let's break that down to the horror in this time. So the limitations of horror are only what you allow them to be. We are horror writers. I am a horror writer. Uh, I like, there are certain things that I wouldn't do in my horror genre. Yes, I will have a kid killing something, but no, I don't believe that you have to have blood to make it scary. I don't believe that you have to have somebody running around with a knife, cutting people up to make it scary. I like to go deeper into the psychology of why it's scary. I want that person to finish the story and be like, okay, I finished it, and then go off and think about it. And then, like, something ticks, you'll see something, and it'll tick in the back of your head, like, oh my God, oh my God, this could totally be like just what Tracy wrote about, you know? And I've had this happen before. I had a girlfriend and she's like, so when reading your work, I know these are the following things that I don't want to do. I need to check my shoes before I come in the house because
Yeah.
there's a story called Tikazika where this girl tracked a bug in and it killed everybody, you know? And she's just like, I need to do this. I need to do that. And I'm just like, yeah. So I didn't know that I had these like rules that I was making, but I think this is sort of fun. But the other thing about the genre is that I wanted to read a quote actually from Stephen Graham Jones in an article that I read, because in regards to writing about horror, I think this is pretty appropriate. And so Stephen Graham Jones said he said that we love horror because it ends. When we're surrounded by actual horror every day, and when it seems so endless, we can turn to horror entertainment for comfort. So the thing is that we have been living in a horror story in this entire pandemic. But when you write a book or a story, there's that satisfaction of like, okay, it ended, and you know, now I know that it's going to be, now I know what happened. You know, like I wrote a story about a little girl that a woman that was babysitting a girl, and the girl says, you know, my dad has monsters in the basement, and the babysitter didn't believe it. And then at the end of the story, you kind of can figure what happened, but then that's it. You're just like, okay, so now we've reached the end, and I don't have to worry about anything else because it's all wrapped up in a nice little bow. And I'm really, you know, this is final for me. This pandemic, it's never ending. You know, mask on, mask off, shots here, shots there. You know, I'm not going to get the vaccine. Yes, I'm going to get the vaccine. It's just an evolving horror story. But I think in the now times, you just want something that starts and ends that you can have some closure with.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, so much. Oh, the pandemic. I'm like, I wish the pandemic were a book where it's like, psych, it's done. Or wait, it's a sequel. I feel that's what it is. That's what I think it is with these like variants. It's like, it's the sequel, or it's like chapter 2, or it's like COVID.
Yeah, it's just never ending.
It's
And then
never
it's like,
ending.
because you're like, this could be over. Like I always say, if everybody got vaccinated, we wouldn't have these variants. I'm not a scientist. I could be wrong. I don't know. But my thought was like, because I work with the public and I deal with the public in so many facets, and I have people that come in and there's like, there's no virus, you know, and then they're whipping the mask off, or they come in and they say things like, you know, you're not supposed to wear a mask in here. And I'm like, if you look around, everyone in this building has masks on. And, you know, you walk in and you're just like, no, it's supposed to wear a mask. And I'm like, okay, so here's what we do, y'all. Like, as a horror writer, I'm thinking, that's what we do. The government can do it. We all know the government can do it. Aerate the virus. Just aerate it and just go over all the cities, all the towns, spray it, put it in the air. Bam, we're good. We're golden. No more COVID. But we can't do that. Then you get into people going, oh, you violated my rights and da 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 da. But you know, it's just this pandemic, and they're like, there's another. It's always like there's another rise and there's another fall. There's another spike and there's another thing. You know, like the mask come off and now there's a spike, and then, but you know it's gonna happen. That's the difference with this horror story that we are living. You kind of figure this is what's gonna happen, so you have to just either go with it or just not go with it. And I just choose to kind of just, I'm right here in the middle. My daughter wears a mask, even though she doesn't have to. I wear a mask. You know, I'm just, you do what you need to do for yourself. But if you come talking to me with with no mask on, just know that I'm going to put like 10 feet between us because I don't know you, you know.
And someone commented in the comments, pandemic as a scary nonfiction reality TV show. It's true, because it's kind of like, I don't know if I can say this through the FCC, but there's a show that currently exists out there where like you get punked. And I feel like whenever I go in places and people aren't wearing masks, I'm like, wait a minute. And there's a big old mask mandate sign right there and nobody wearing. I'm like, am I getting punked right now? Is somebody gonna come
I'm just like, when did this happen? When did they lift this mandate? You know, and it's scary because people are living like this. But yeah, it's like, it's never ending. It's always, there's always, you know, at least when you watch Punked, you know, oh, there's the season finale. You know, this is how it's going to end. You know, this is the last episode. But with this, there is no season finale. We are just going on and on and on and on. and it's just it. But I try not to think about that. I'm a positive person. I try not to think about that. I like to think, one day, it'll be okay. Like, but when you think back to like when the way we were living in 2000, that looks like straight up hedonism as compared to how we're living now. Because you're just like, we were running out without no mask on, and we were getting tattoos, and we were like doing this and that. And that was kind of fun. And I'm looking back and I'm like, we were just ugh. And you look at it now and you're just like, wear the mask, this is the mandate. And I'm just like, to go back to the days of old.
Yes, which there's a part of me, I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't want to go back to that because I remember when I worked in an office, we're now still remote. And of course, I'm a woman and I'm a cis woman, and I go to, the women's restroom. And I would hear women come out of the stall and just open the door. And I'm like, we all know, like, if you sit on the toilet, I'm about to get TMI here. You sit on the toilet and use the restroom, you're going to have to, I'm hoping, wipe yourself and then leave. If you do that, you have to wash your hands. So what I love about the pandemic, it's taught us a basic hygiene thing that we should have been doing since forever, is washing your hands. Because just like,
and it's just, and then the thing is, like, sing happy birthday, that happy birthday song 3 times while you wash your hands, or you have some kind of little mantra that you do, and I'm just like, really, like, we had to actually come out with a rule for this? Like, y'all ain't know to, like, you don't just dip, like, it's like you're baptizing your hands in the water and then you're taking it out like, ooh, no. You got to put the soap on it. You got to rub it in. You got to get down in between the nails. You got to do it all. And these people, I'm like, you had to come up with sing happy birthday to yourself 3 times. Like, are you serious right now? Like, I fear for us. This is just right. I fear. And it makes you question, like, did you sing happy birthday 3 times before you served me this plate? Like, like someone said, I was watching Family Guy and it says employees must wash hands, and Peter walks out and it goes, it doesn't say you have to.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Now I'm like, I'm going to start cooking at home. Because I wash my hand, like when I cook, because I have a family of 4. I like wash my hands so many times cooking because I'm like, I don't need nobody to get sick, and I'm super paranoid of food poisoning. So I'm just like, I might just start cooking at home.
My skin is so dry while I'm washing my hands, I can do this and like start a flame.
Yeah!
I touch chicken, gotta wash my hands. Touch chicken breast, gotta wash my hands. Cutting up lettuce, gotta wash my hands. And just my daughter's like, well, is food ready? And I'm like, no, I'm washing my hands for the 85th time to make sure that you don't die. So
yes, you can do the computer love sound effect with your hands, dude. Be like, wow. Oh my God, it's hilarious. So going back to the book, because we could talk about the pandemic needs to be its own show for me.
Telling you, it's a horror story that never ends.
It is. When I've read fiction with a young protagonist, and I tend to read a lot of YA. The text comes with a lesson. Given that in this book we have 3 young protagonists, how do you see your readers connecting to the protagonist of Root Work?
So when it comes to the text that has a lesson, I did speak of this earlier, but it's all about the journey, right? It's not and a destination, but the thing is, it's always about the journey for me, the journey that the character takes, and the way that each character evolves and grows or learns something about themselves they didn't know at the beginning of the story. So we have Pee-wee in the book, and she's like a young kid, doesn't know much, but we see the way that she comes into herself throughout the story. The same way with Anne wanting to be more independent, and it's the journey towards independence. And Betty, with her, this is how I want to live my life, and then we even see the journey of the mother, who's just like, I want my girls to grow up and be independent, especially when the dad comes back and he's like talking about, I heard a Black woman graduated from a college in Oberlin. These could be my girls. So it's all about the journey. I like to take the reader on a journey, and then we all can arrive at the destination together, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So I just have a couple more questions before we go to, because there was a couple that came in from our viewers today for Q&A. Who in your life inspired you to become a writer, especially a horror writer? And how do you see yourself mentoring others, especially writers of color, who want to explore the genre?
If I say who inspired me, I may get kicked off of I may have my Black people papers revoked. But I will tell you, I used to watch Twilight Zone all the time.
Ooh.
Oh, I love Twilight Zone. And my dad, he watched these movies from the 60s that were just what the hell? There was a movie, Mr. Sardonicus, that I loved. And it was the buildup of everything that happened in that movie that I was like, I wish I could write a story like this and have this build up. Like the guy, it's a poor family, and the father, they hit the lottery basically for $50 million. Okay, let's say. So the dad dies. And what they don't realize is that the dad has the ticket in the suit buried. So the wife's like, you have to go get this ticket. You have to go, because you have to, telling the husband, this is your father, your fault. You got to go get the ticket. So he goes to the cemetery, and you see it's in black and white, and he's carrying a lantern, and he's dragging a shovel. He's scared to death, and he's digging the hole. He's digging out the grave, and I'm just like, oh my God, is the father going to jump out? What is happening? What's happening? I remember watching this when I was 14 with my parents in the living room on a hot summer night, and I just kept moving further back into my parents with my sister. We were just stepping further back. But then you see the guy dig, and then the coffin opens, and there's the father, and it's his skull, and you're just oh, but that's not it. That's just only part of the scare. So then you're oh, so he gets the ticket and goes home, and he's walking in the bedroom, and the wife is fussing. She's just oh, it took you forever, and you're finally back. And he's oh. He's not saying anything. He's So then she's well, did you get the ticket? And he's And then she's oh, she got the ticket. Oh my God. Thank God for this. Come on, go to bed, whatever. And you just feel why isn't he responding? He was talking to her earlier. He's not talking to her now. And the wife's I just don't know what's wrong with you. And she reaches over and turns on the light, and his face is stuck in this paralysis of a skull. And these teeth are just huge and gigantic. And I'm oh my God, just I looked at it and I was Dad, what happened?
Oh my God.
And it was just but that's the buildup. That's this, you just keep going, and you want to know how is this man going to eat after this? And so I watched movies like this, and then I watched The Twilight Zone, and then I read a lot of Rod Serling, and my favorite author, Richard Matheson. I love this man to death. And then I read some Charles Beaumont, and I decided to, they say imitation is the best form of flattery, right? So I was I tried to write with the twist to keep the reader going, because it's that ongoing sense of mystery that I want the reader to have, I had when I watched Mr. Sardonicus. It's just I want the reader to keep reading, and to just, it's breadcrumbs are sprinkled throughout. And then when you get to the surprise, you're oh my God, oh my God. And then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you just oh my God, you could even say that in root work. You think, okay, this happened. This has got to be the end. And then it just keeps going. And you're just oh, wait, there's something else that's going to happen after this, then, oh, wait, there's something else that's coming, just and then the sisters have to come together and do what, never stops. Richard Matheson is my number one dude. Charles Beaumont, he died very young. He's my number two dude. I do love Zora Neale Hurston's work, but I didn't get into her until recently. But all throughout my childhood, I just consumed everything Matheson wrote. And because he wrote Twilight Zone episodes with Rod Serling, so you knew you had a good episode if it's written by Matheson and it's starring William Shatner. That's how you knew it was a good episode. Or if it was written by Beaumont, starring William Shatner, I'm all in. I'm all ears. I'm here for it. But, and it's just sad that Beaumont didn't get to actually live past 45. I think he died very young.
Wow.
Yeah, but he wrote like he knew something was going to happen. He wrote so many stories, and when you find them, you're just like, oh my God, this is so great. It's like anytime you find a new Beaumont story, it's like Christmas for me. I'm like, oh my God, yes. So about mentoring other Black horror writers, I think I'm still learning. I'm still growing and learning, and even as old as I am, which is more than 10, less than 90, um, I'm still learning. All I can say is that, do you really want me for a mentor? No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
Because, I can help as much as I can help. But it isn't until you get out and you start writing and doing it yourself and releasing that baby into the world that you can actually get the proper feedback that you need so that you can become better. Yeah, I can be a mentor. Sure. I'm already kind of a mentor to some people, but I'm all about you need to find your own voice. Don't try and copy my voice. Don't try and copy Matheson's voice. Don't try and copy this voice. Find your own voice. I will help you onto the path, but you're going to have to walk that path alone.
nice. And then the last question I have for Tracy before I go to Q&A from our viewers. After your book comes out, what is next for you, and how can Black Writers Read community support you in your work?
Well, so what's next is I have a novella that I'm querying right now. That's kind of a little bit of a sequel to Root Work. It's
Ooh.
a haunted story. It's got a ghost. It's based on another story that my two great aunts told me, and they told me never to ask my grandmother about the story. And so after my one great aunt died, I asked my grandmother, and she just was like, "Well, they told you not to ask me." And I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, she laughed so hard. She was like, "This is what really happened." And it was scarier than what my great aunts told me. So I was like, oh my God, I have
Wow.
to put this down on paper because this is going to be fantastic. It's called The Haunted, and it's a follow up to Root Work. So I'm just querying that out right now to see if I can get a publisher for that. You can check out my site, Tracy Cross online. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I have a very dry sense of humor.
Okay.
And you can also support me by supporting other female writers and supporting other Black writers, buying the Don't Break the Oath, the Candicia Press book, because that I have a story, the true story of Bloody Mary, that takes place in 1980, and it's got like a kind of Stranger Things vibe to it, but it's more relatable to us as Black writers and Black people because, we did do things a lot differently than then. I mean, I have a character that he's like, hey, baby, age ain't nothing but a number, and he's like 7 hitting on this like 18-year-old babysitter. So I have like that coming out. That is out already. And there's other things on my site. You can listen to Black Women Are Scary. That's a really great podcast. That's where I got my start. Nightlight podcast with Tanya Ransom. Really awesome. Just support us. We want to win all the things. It's all about Black excellence here, right? So let's support each other and lift each other up. And yeah, but you can follow me. I mean, I'll keep you guys posted if you come on our website. You'll see. Let you know when something's happening. I did win the scholarship from hell for the Horror Writers Association.
Yay!
This week. So I will be at StokerCon, and I will be on a panel for the next anthology that I will be in called Other Terrors. It's an anthology, and my story, All Not Ready, is in there, and it's a story with kids being kids, kind of killing each other, playing hide and seek and whatnot. But it's got some of the old school rhymes that I used to say when I was little, because I really think that these are things that we need to capture. And when I die, what is my legacy? Who is going to say what Tracy did? I'll have these stories, and the stories will have the games that I played when I was younger, like, All Not Ready, Shout Billy Goat, things like this, because there will be no one else around to tell these stories. So I want to share my stories in my work as much as I can.
Perfect. So I have a couple of questions that came in from our viewers. So one of them, I'm going to doctor it up a little bit because I forgot to ask you a question along these lines. So the question was around like the practice of voodoo. Is voodoo something practiced in your family? And then how have you cited and used spirituality to inform how it shows up in Root Work?
voodoo is not practiced in my family. No, they're just like, no, we don't play that. But even I'm trying to think here. Me personally, I believe in God, but I also am a practicing Buddhist. I've been a Buddhist since I was 17. So, I mean, you believe in what you believe in. But the funny thing is, if I go to my family and I directly ask them, do you practice hoodoo? They will say no. But if I say something like there's a ghost in my house, I feel like there's a spirit in my house or something, then my mom will say something like, well, then what you need to do is open your Bible. That's hoodoo. She just
Yep.
didn't know that that was hoodoo, or if like I go over someone's house and they have some water out and they had the cup of water out all night long. And they're
Yep.
like, I put this water by your bed, Tracy. And I'm like, oh, I don't want that water. And they're like, why don't you want the water? I'm like, the spirits have been drinking from that water all night. I need my own fresh water. And, people are looking at you like, what? And I'm like, this is how I grew up. So I don't practice it. We don't necessarily formally practice voodoo, but we do incorporate a lot of the traditions of hoodoo into our lives daily and not realize it.
Yeah, just like I remember there was an aunt, she recently passed away. She always slept with a fork under her pillow. Like it's just so interesting, like how in a lot of because my family is from the South. I'm originally from Detroit. Like how much hoodoo shows up in Southern traditions and people don't make the connections to it.
Exactly. Like my great aunt Lois that just died, whenever it was a storm, she would go and stab an iron like bar or something into the ground to redirect the lightning. Didn't know that. I'd
Oh,
see her running out and she's stabbing it into the ground because that's something her mother did. But that's like hoodoo. I mean, you really think about it, that's hoodoo. It's just like
right.
I think my sister was having a bad dream and she told my great aunt, and my great aunt was like, well, a witch is riding your body. You got to sleep with a fork in your mattress, some silver and in between your mattresses to keep that from happening because it feels like somebody's trying to possess you. All of that is hoodoo,
Yeah.
but it's just not labeled as such. These little things that we do that are part of our lives that no one's really recording, but yeah, it's something that is from the past. Maybe it's something that's brought over from Africa. That's why I encourage people to go back, look into your past, understand and learn where you come from so you can understand and see where you're going.
Yes. And then the last question that came in from our audience today, it's from a regular viewer, my friend Ella. She wanted to know, and she's a fellow writer as well. She does a lot of poetry and journalism. How long did it take you to write this book? That was her
Oh,
question.
it took like I want to say 2 to 3 years. I had been working on other little things in between. But I want to say because the research, it's the linguistics of the story that took so long because I was just such a perfectionist with the language, and then I needed to understand the land and I needed to understand what it was like. I mean, this is why Pinterest is such a great place to go when you don't know a whole lot of stuff. You can just like African Americans 1880, and then it'll like pull up like all of these little things. So you always want to do your due diligence and research. Like Levi Strauss was not the first person to come up with blue jeans.
Mm,
People were because they figured out how to remove the dye from the indigo plant. Who knew? Who knew? But I can't put that in my story because it was kind of one of those on the low things. So I had to be more accurate. I had to look at like there's some things that I had questions about, like would there be a record player? And I discovered that the record player had just kind of been invented, so not a lot of people would have it. But
mm.
I wanted to incorporate some type of music and dancing into it. So it's just people are ready. People are ready to destroy you for like the smallest thing. So when I'm writing or when I'm doing something, I do that research and I go down to the smallest, most minute detail because I don't want someone to come back and say, well, they didn't have paper towels in the 1800s. or something like this, or they didn't have knives and forks back then, so I don't want that to happen. I want someone to come and say, you know what, this book was really great. I felt historically immersed in it, and I see that you put a lot of effort into it. Great job, pat me on the back, give me my flower.
And thank you so much for bringing up like the archive, because that's something I feel like a lot of people don't understand that writers do. Yes, there's like our organic dialogue, but I know for myself, because I am rendering lives that were once invisible, I pull from the archive to make sure that not only am I not mistaking history or misquoting history, but making sure that history shows up in a very particular way, which, by the way, our previous episode in February, we featured a historian, Curry Polk, who gives a shout out to archivists and just like the beauty that libraries and that collections of work and archives have.
Yeah,
So,
because without that, we would, okay, so as I am a horror writer, I enjoy writing horror. I enjoy the slow scare. You can do whatever you want to do, but if it's not realistic enough, then it's not gonna work. Does that make sense? Like, you need to do some research on something. It's because, like, when people tell me I haven't been in a library in 20 years, and I'm like, so what? You know everything? Is that what it is? Like, you are just this smart? But that's what I want to say, but I don't say it because I'm just like, how could you not go to a library? There's so many awesome things in libraries and online, and like I said, when I was doing this research, I had an accountability partner, and I would help her to get her stuff going. And she asked me, what did I need? And I said I needed this specific dialect in the late 1800s in Louisiana. She came at me with 5 volumes of this hoodoo voodoo book, 5,000-page volumes. Okay. Then she put me in touch with this woman, and the man who did the volumes had recorded some of the people talking. So then you have that, and I just, to get the dialogue alone, I know that I spent about 6 months just going through the books, just you have to have, you have to have a list of, like, these are the words that I want, and then these are the ways that they said the words back then, you know. So you have to be able to have that, like, continuation, because you don't want to break it, and screw up. And then especially with, these people putting all their time and effort into archiving and stuff, and you don't want to, like, shout out to Indiana University because I screwed everything up, and then they're just like, oh no, don't shout us out ever again, Tracy, because this is not good. You definitely did this wrong. So yeah, shout out to all the archivists, shout out to everybody who does the research, because I can tell you, when you read a story that is not well researched or not well thought out, you can tell. You can, and as a horror person, I've read stories where I'm sitting there and I'm going like, this is not, no, put the book away, because you just can't, because it's just like, this is not even real. There's no way this would happen. Now, you can suspend disbelief for so long, but if it just doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Right. And then we have one more question that I want to take. And this one is from Nina. She's also a long-time supporter of Black Writers Read. And this is a really, before I bring up this question, it's really important. I know what the response is. And this is a conversation that Tracy and I had right before we came on the air. So the questions are, what age were you writing for? And where can we get this book? Deep breath. Yeah.
Okay. So everything was set. It was coming. The book was coming out. Thank you, Nina, for your question. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, by the way. And thank you for listening to me ramble for about an hour, because, that's always fun. So my publisher closed her doors. She closed the doors. So the book will not be coming out in May like I had hoped. We have a couple of other options that we're working on. We, meaning me, myself, and I. Like, I talk like there's a bunch of us here. It's just Tracy. But currently I am looking at trying to find another publisher to put it out. If worse comes to worse, I can probably put it on Amazon as a Kindle reads only. That way you can download it there. But I really, because we worked hard on the cover, and
It's gorgeous.
I want everyone to have like a copy of this, because then when you see me, I'll have something to autograph as opposed to just sign this piece of paper. So yeah, I just keep an eye on like my media feeds, like my Instagram, my Twitter, my website, and I will definitely share when I find something out. I am in discussion with some other people right now. And the age that this book is written for, I mean, I write horror for people who like to read it. I'm not going to sit and think of like, well, I wanted to do like 16 to 22, like, new adult or young adult or juvenile. It's for people who like to read and for people that want to understand or learn. So, I mean, there's some of my works that I would be like, I have a niece that's 13. I would be like, oh, I don't think she should read that. Not because there's something graphic or horrible in it, but just because of the content of like, I don't think she can handle some of the aspects of the story. So like this, I would say there are some things in it that I don't think anyone like under the age of 20 can really understand, specifically the things that happen with the sheriff. I don't really think that they would understand the significance of why all of this is happening. So I would, adults is basically who I write for. I write for people like me that like to read. That's about it. I'm sorry it wasn't like a super prolific answer, but yeah.
Yeah, but the reason, and I'm so glad that someone asked a question about the publishing thing. So, one of the reasons why I created Black Writers Read is no matter how prolific our writing is, there is still this how do you break into the industry to where other people can access your work? Also, to understanding the maze where you're like thrown in blindfolded and turned around and drunk and pushed in the dark to understand the industry. And for almost every single writer that I've had on Black Writers Read and will have on Black Writers Read, the journey has not been easy. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of reasons for that. And I'm hoping there's so much of a mission that I have with Black Writers Read, not only to become the reading rainbow of the 21st century, encouraging literacy and people to read, but also talking about the industry and how it impacts the ways in which we show up in the industry. Also, too, what we contribute to the literary canon, because a lot of our work, dangerous air quotes, is not really considered of the canon. And I'm looking to not necessarily redefine the canon, but emphasize the fact that these works show up in the canon. Just don't forget about these works.
Well, we have stories that need to be told.
Yes.
You have your cisgendered white men that have been running the horror industry for so long that now the doors are being opened because people realize, oh, Jordan Peele is doing this, and so now next thing everyone is going to be looking for the next Jordan Peele. But here's the thing that what we need to understand, and what I like to talk to about horror, is that horror is as Black writers, it's almost like we have a different set of rules. And I wrote an entire paper on this. I think I'm going to just try and get it published somewhere. But you have horror that is like Jordan Peele's kind of horror. And then you have like Black horror. So for me, I don't want to read about Black pain or read about and no disrespect, but Lena Waithe's show that was on Amazon had everybody feeling angry. I don't want to write horror that feels angry. I write horror where you can take this person out and put any other person in and it'll still be the same. I'm just a Black writer adding my little Black touches to it, as opposed to taking something like a lynching or a raping of a Black woman, or, you know, like hanging. I don't think that's horror. That's fear. And no one wants to really reread that fear. You know, I'm not saying that they're bad, but I'm just saying that as a Black person, I don't want to read a horror story about a guy that gets pulled over by the cops and gets his ass beat. That's not what I'm not here for that. I'm here to let your imagination go soar somewhere where it never went before, like with the monsters in the basement, or, you know, with the bug on the bottom of your shoe. These are situations that anybody can have occur to them, or you can take the main protagonist out and put anyone else in there and it'll still be a horror story. Does that make sense? Instead of like, I'm just a Black woman giving you my interpretation or my experience with it. But I will never cross that whole other line where it's like, who wants to watch Black fear on screen? You know, it's like in Black History Month, which I have renamed Black Excellence Month. But it's like they've put on all of these roots, you know, and like slave things, and we're just supposed to be like, oh, thank you for remembering us. No, no one wants to see that during Black Excellence Month. I made it a point this year to only highlight the things that are good, because we are Black and we are awesome and we are excellent, and we need to show each other that, and we need to share the excellence that it is, not keep going back and reliving Roots and, you know, Toby and Kunta and all. We don't need to do that. We have so many other things that we can offer. So let's just focus on that. You know, I'm sorry, I went off on
No, this is what it's for. And I'm all I gotta say is, one, I'm sick and tired of seeing Kunta's foot get cut off. I've seen Roots, Roots every year in elementary school, but also two, along those lines. I think a whole other episode. It's like I purposefully stay away from certain things, and so like I'm so mad at myself for watching the first episode of Underground Railroad, because it traumatized me in so many different ways. But there are stories. It's like, yes, we know slavery happened. Yes, people tell the story. We know that story, but what about our magic? What about why can't we exist?
Exactly. What about Black Girl Magic? What about all of this other things that we're doing? We're not only doing that. Yes. We're doing so many more things. I mean, I would rather, and I wasn't a big fan of it, but I would rather watch LeBron James in Space Jam than to watch Roots for like the 85th time of my life. You know, it's just like, come on, y'all. We know, you know, like, you know, Shaka Zulu. We all know the story. You know, we understand. You keep browbeating us with it every freaking year. And, you know, I'm not seeing enough excellence here. You know, like, I need to see more of us being excellent, which is why I will always boost a Black writer, boost a person of color, boost a Native American writer, anybody that we can get that story out to, that so we don't have to deal with these other stereotypes like, well, you know, on Thanksgiving, the Indians came and did, you know, no, it's not about that. Let's change the narrative. Let's all focus on changing the narrative to being more excellent. We are excellent as a people. We are excellent. Let's talk about the excellence. Let's show the world the excellence. Let's stop going back and, you know, I don't understand why networks think that we want to see this. Like Steve McQueen did I can't think of the 12 Years a Slave.
A bunch of movies that I don't want to see because of the trauma.
Just like, this is trauma. I don't want to see this. I don't want to see Brad Pitt in the field like, oh yes, mighty Black warrior person, you know, I'm gonna let you go. No, I want to see Brad Pitt traipsing across the screen, running after a Black girl going, Tracy, I need you in my life. You know, something like this. This is, girl, don't even. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, do not. This is exactly what that's one of the reasons why I not only saw Black Panther in the theaters 5 times in like the first month, I bought tickets and brought people with me. I was like, yo, like there's a way that we showed up on screen. Like every time I went to go see it. And the Marvel, this is why representation is important. The Marvel title card came up, and I'm a huge like Marvel Cinematic Universe Avengers fan. And I started crying because I was like, this is a movie about us. And it is now in this milieu. It's in the mainstream. And like people don't understand like how transformative it is for people to see our joy and to see our happiness, because we exist in those worlds. If people keep seeing us in these traumas, they're going to think that we are of these traumas and this is how they should interact with us. Whereas I'm like, they
Yeah.
need to see our joy.
Well, and the other thing is that think about, like, I think about my niece and my nephews. And
Mm.
when they see something like Black Panther, they see Letitia Wright, she's on the screen and she's a scientist and she's doing things. And, Chadwick Boseman is doing things and he was a great actor. You have to think about how the youth look at this because it shows them like how they are represented.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can write a book like Root Work that has three little, knot-headed girls going off and learning how to be something, and, one Black child picks it up and goes, you know what, Mom? I see the Black woman that wrote the book on the back, and
Aww.
that makes me feel like I can write a book too. If I can get one person that'll do that, one person that's like, there's a Black girl, she's writing books, she talks about how her past was not the greatest in the world, but she's doing a thing and I can do it too. And that's what I would mentor too. I would say something like, hey, you can do it. You don't have to worry about everybody else doing it. You can do it. Like when I saw Black Panther, my heart swelled. I just, and I understand that the Avengers, or I'm sorry, X-Men, because I do DC and Marvel. I'm not a hater. So
Yes.
I understand how Professor X was supposed to be Martin Luther King Jr. and how Magneto was supposed to be Malcolm X. But that's like a veiled thing. Like not everybody gets that. But then you throw something like Black Panther and it's like, bam, we are Black. We are doing this. We got this. We got a whole city, y'all. We got we got even Black Starbucks. Okay, everything is Black in here. Chadwick pimping in, and then the camera. It was just like everything about Black Panther worked. The camera angle, the way it twisted around when Michael Jordan came in, and he was like taking over the throne. And I'm just like, these are such subtle little tricks that people don't know. But then you look at like a little kid watching. Like my daughter watched it, and she was just like, wow. They're all brown, just like me on the screen. And I'm like, and you can be smart like that too. Don't let nobody tell you that you can't do it because you can.
And then also too, just a nod to the lighting and the costume design, which by the way, the costume designer, she is originally from up the block. I'm about 20 minutes from Springfield. And just how beautiful we looked on screen. I was like the blues and I was like, oh my God. It was like a love story that we've always needed.
The rich texture of the brown skin, because like I remember Keenan Ivory Wayans was on a Tonight Show and he was talking about when he first started in the industry. And he said, he's watching everybody else go and sit in these makeup chairs. So the makeup artist comes to him and they're like, what do we do? So they just scooped some Vaseline out and did this and just rubbed it all over his face and put it on camera. And they showed this scene and he's like shining, Black, smiling, and you could barely see him, but he's just like, ha, 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 and I'm just sitting there like, you watch something like the Black Panther, you go, we have come such a long way. We have come such a, Pat, I can't think of her name, with her own makeup line for Black people. We have come such a long way. I mean, even when I was growing up, white people were like, I want to learn, but I don't know how to do Black hair. And you just sit there going, yeah, okay.
Yes.
But, you're just like, okay, I don't even know what to say to that. Like, for real, I don't even know what to say to that. But we have come a long way. We have empowered ourselves and we need to keep doing this. And we need to show the kids that it's okay. It is okay to do all of these things.
Yes.
It is okay for it.
Yes. And Lisa, who helped us produce today's episode in the comments, Ruth Carter is from Springfield. Yes. Proud to be from Springfield. And she recently came back a couple of times to speak at different colleges. And I think her mom may still be in the area. So yes. She is from Springfield, which I love that she's from the area. So this is a great segue into transitioning out of the show. So Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to do a couple of wrap-up things and then be on my way for
Thank you guys for
yeah.
having me, and thank you for listening to me ramble. I do, it's been great. I hope I didn't disappoint. I know a lot
Nope.
of people seem to think horror writers were all like goth with like dark makeup, and I'm sitting in the dark summoning Satan, the cat.
Summoning Satan.
Actually, yeah, I'm just like a fun-going mom that likes to garden, and I talk about gardening with my horror friends, which
Yes.
it's like, "Did you start your lettuce?" "No, girl, but I did start my strawberries," It's like that's what horror is. We go darker places for our things. And can I just show my shirt?
Yes, please do. Yes.
My friend bought this for me, and it's a dope
Yay.
Black author. I love it. So I just wanted to just give him a shout out. Thank you, Brandon, so much for this shirt. And I'll just like have to freeze frame that and just send it to him. And thank you so
Yes.
much for having me. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it. I do appreciate it so much. And let's pay it forward. Let's try and get this book published.
Yes.
We got like a millionaire uncle. Have them
Yes.
because I am open. I am open. It needs to be out there. I really think that it would do some good. I've been getting some reviews and some feedback, and all of it has been great. So if I get to Oprah, I'm bringing us all.
Yes.
I'll go together. Okay. I see Lisa. I will reach out to you, Lisa. No problem.
Yes.
She's like, Holla, hurry up. Let's get
Holla
this
now.
going. Shut up talking, Tracy.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. Again, I appreciate it. And I just love sharing my work and sharing my happiness here.
Yay, thank you so much. So Black Writers Read, and I love the way in which Tracy closed us out. This brings us to a very important time for Black Writers Read. Black Writers Read has entered a major transition period. Beginning this summer, we are launching Black Writers Read as an audio podcast. Starting in July, I will produce a retrospective airing past episodes of Black Writers Read with follow-ups from our previous guests. For season 3, we will continue the same format we have here, where we live stream the episode to social media. The audio from each episode will be uploaded as an audio podcast within the week of the initial broadcast. What will make this podcast unique is that we plan to retain the question and answer portion, soliciting questions from our friends both during the episode, like we do now, and prior to the live stream. I will be requesting questions to pose to our guests a week prior to the episode via social media. So please be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on the interwebs via these links here. I am at NicoleMYoung.com. On Facebook, I am at writer Coco Pen Explore, and on Instagram at Coco_Pen Explore. An endeavor like this is a huge undertaking, especially being that the series, I don't know if how many of you know this, is not only self-produced, it is self-funded. I have maxed out plenty of credit cards to pay for Black Writers Read. I have several things in the works right now, like obtaining a trademark on the name, hiring an associate producer and sound engineer, taking on a national marketing campaign, and launching a new website. And also for people who are joining us for the first time, I also pay an honorarium to all of our guests, which is a very unique feature to podcasts and radio shows and things like that. Earlier this month, I started an Indiegogo campaign, which is scheduled to run throughout the month of April. Perks include shout outs on social media. I have a pretty large following on Facebook and Instagram. Black Writers Read merchandise and autographed books from our guests. And thank you. And thank yous just across the board. So be sure to visit my website at NicoleMYoung.com to learn more about Black Writers Read, and also to learn about the Indiegogo campaign and how to join the vast list of supporters for today. So I'm happy to announce that I'll be back next month. I have my guests lined up for April, which is National Poetry Month. I will be joined by Shanta Lee Gander. She is an amazing poet, prose writer, journalist, and photographer from Vermont. That episode is going to air on Sunday, April 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So please be sure to follow me on social media and check out my website again at NicoleMYoung.com for more information on that particular episode. So thanks again to Lisa Pegram and Levee Break Lit for co-presenting today's episode. Thanks to all of our viewers for spending a Saturday afternoon with us, and also more importantly, for making Black authors matter. See you on April 10th.